Lawman Bass Reeves. Wow, isn't it nice to at least have a good show? Not a great show, not the best show ever, but there are some really good moments, and it's had some great moments in this season. And catching you up on episodes 4 and 5, I off a week, so if you're not familiar with the Bass Reeves history, he's the first black U.S. Marshal. It's a real historic figure. The show takes some creative liberties at times, which can lend itself to much debate. Now, I'll say this, they kind of want their cake and eat it too, right? Because they want to create a place where the world is a little bit more prejudiced and racist than they want it to be. So, like Shea Wiggum's character, the original slave owner, it was sort of like a manufactured crisis. I don't think any of that was historically accurate, but it was a great scene, and it meant to embody the evil of its time. Then at the same time, then they kind of want to have this place where they can exist, own properties, walk around completely unfeathered, no issues. And they're in like Arkansas. They're in like south portion of the country. So you would think there'd be a lot more of that. So they have this one scene with the kids in this last sequence, but it's not been a common thing. It's more about Bass Reeves. All the stuff with the family, all the stuff with society and all of that, I got to be honest, is sort of like the meh part of the show. I don't know anyone else. I just enjoy watching David O just talk Bass Reeves through villain or adventure of the week. Like that is just what I want. I wish this was like a 20 episode serial where I've just seen different lawman stories and then in the background developing different issues with the family, because I think that's a take home from these last two episodes, especially episode 5, is what's the cost of doing this? What's the cost of having to be away from his family? He makes a comment about how he hadn't been home in, I think, 41 days. It's at least a month. He has to go right back out again. It takes like a week to get this from where they are to this appointment to take someone for a hearing, which turns into a hanging in Texas. What's the toll on having her raise kids without him? They barely know him, things like that. That all of that can be developed as sort of like this backstory over here, and not take sort of like center stage to what we really want to see, which is more Bass Reeves. So, with that, we'll walk through the recap just briefly because I didn't do that episode where you have the family stuff here, and you have him. This is Billy Crow, who he kind of takes under his wing. He basically was a criminal with a good heart, caught up with the wrong crowd. Bass sees something in him. It's sort of like he becomes like a gun for hire who kind of wants to learn how to be the lawman. And what's interesting with Billy is his naivete, right? Everything about Billy is very naive. And I will say just the different shots that they do, the immersion in this, it really feels good. These episodes may not be even as good as like the first couple episodes in that way, but they're still very authentic feeling. So they're on a stakeout. This is what we want to see. We want to see them catching a criminal. They know they're in there. They know they're manned up. They use this cart and this wagon to kind of get closer, and they end up in this shootout. And I will say it's done very well. Like Billy takes a shot, it takes a grazing by the neck. I would say this too. This show doesn't really have necessarily the grittiness of like Deadwood does. It's not really doesn't really deal with like survival issues or anything like that, like 1883 does. But it does give you an essence of this era and what's going on, that kind of thing. I wish there was a little bit more into the scouting and getting information part, because they skipped over all of that as far as Bass Reeves, his personal life. They skipped that whole era of his life where he was learning, where he was a scout. He learned to be a scout. He was hired to be a scout. He had to tell he made a name for himself to get this job. They skip over all that. So a little more of that probably would have lent itself to be a little bit better. But he goes home. Here's just a little bit of Donald Sutherland in the court. And the amount of money that he makes is just astronomical. So by getting that group together, they're all in one location. So he and Billy take them all out at one time. So that's all of the bounties at one time. So I think she counts out $700, which in their money is like, it probably costs like 15, 20 grand. It's a lot of money. So he's doing all right. He is doing all right. Dennis Quaid basically just puts him right back on a job. Gets home with the family, and we have the gratuitous, obligatory moment there. Sorry, not gratuitous at all, but just what you would expect. They've been apart from one another, and then she has this great confrontation. Like, why do you think that they wouldn't know you? You're gone again. You're leaving again for another week. And he's like, I have an obligation. I have an oath. And she says, yes, but we have an oath. You made an oath to me as your wife. And I'm like, see, in this new era of modern politicking and conversations, this is where it isn't, she's not degrading him. She's not belittling him. She's just expressing how she feels. And it's a very valid response. None of this felt like bad or contrived or out of place. All of this felt normal. This was why it's so good. So this show is done very well. All right, so they're going to go on their hunt, and this is the backstory. Well, we'll get to the backstory. This is the criminal that they're transporting from where they are in Arkansas down to Texas for this hanging. There's a little bit of this bonding in this episode between he and Bass, because what you really do get is Bass is coming to grips with the fact that there's a very fine line between justice and outlaw. Like he's really not that much difference in this guy. He easily could be in this guy's shoes, and we've seen this. We've seen this play out with a couple of sequences, right? So I like the fact that this is happening, but we're also not being spoon fed. We're not being like, let's discuss this and let's discuss this with the audience for 5 minutes or anything like that. It's just sort of like it plays out very, very well. This is a little bow. They're at this little fair. What is weird here is they're sort of like no one's paying them any mind. And then there's like a little brief sort of like confrontation about a girl cutting in front of them. This is just that backstory of them bonding. This is the scene. So this little girl cuts in front of her, and then she's like nasty to her. Okay. And this is just the journey. And what ends up happening is they're out on this journey. They're bonding, all this different conversation. Oh, there's the other backstory. Oh, I don't care about all that. We'll come back to her in a second. And it's raining. It's pouring down rain. So they got to find a way to take some shelter, right? Now, what I liked about this is we don't even have to know this couple. They don't speak English. They're immigrants that are anxious. There's a comment about they don't trust the law. So I love the fact that we have like character development without having to have character development. So we have two immigrants, a husband and wife immigrants, don't speak English, hesitant of the law. So they came from a country that was very corrupt, whether that be Mexico or otherwise. Obviously, they're in Texas, so that's where they probably came from. However, it could have been somewhere else, just in theory. And it's an interesting sequence of events that kind of play out with them taking care of someone and like generosity, but like having your guard up and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think all of this lent itself to be very, very well done. Again, this is just that backstory. So now, all right, so we come to these two. So this is actually her sister. So Jennie's sister and her, and they've had this long story arc over multiple episodes, and it's probably the least interesting element for the show for me. I don't find anything about the sister that I can kind of get a hold of that I would enjoy diving into. Like I don't know. She's glommed on some other guy who is like an idealistic. We're going to create like a black utopian colony and in partnership with the Indians. It's not going well. Black people are being abducted. It's like this weird little subplot that they keep dabbling with. And it's just like, it doesn't go anywhere of interest to me. And it ends up just putting pressure on her to try to be, should she be questioning her marriage or not? Should she be questioning what she should be doing or not, where her daughter is or not? Just all of this. It's almost like manufactured time filler stuff that I don't find remotely interesting at all. Oh, this was just the care of the other person. And then you end up with this conflict right here with these couple. So the people that, the little girl that she was rude to, the brothers show up and they end up in this big fight. And they hit the black kids hit the white kids, which is, a big no-no, and all that kind of stuff's happening now. So we're setting all of that up for some sort of conflict before we come back around here to take him into town. And then it ends with the shot. Well, we all really want more Barry Pepper because let's face it, Barry Pepper in his little brief moments left massive footprints of things we remember. Great moments between he and Bass, great conflict. Even though you could argue out of character with the way that scene played out, but there's also, I think, positive and negatives to that coin, depending on how you want to look at it. But yeah, this show is a very solid drama. Not as much action as you may want if you want an action only type show, but it's not like Reacher or something like that. It's not like a Western where there's a lot of action, but it's more of a drama, historical piece, those kinds of things, but very well executed. Great performances. All the elements about it is just done really, really well. So I'm enjoying it. I'm still in. Maybe not quite as high of a review as I had at the beginning, but it's still very, very solid. Really enjoying the show, everything about it. Love to hear from you guys. I know Zach's had a great channel show about this with conversations with Mad Barber and Copa and some other folks. So fantastic stuff. I'll try and remember to put the link in there for you guys to see that. Check that out as well. Take care, everybody. I am Pops.